Welcome
Sounds
to
dry.
today's edition of the Win Your Divorce podcast series. This podcast is to kick off and warm you up for my upcoming challenge, Win Your Divorce. We start July 1st, where the first video will land in your inbox. So if you'd like to take part in this, head to Headliner.app/WinYourDivorce or click the link that's in this episode show notes. So what we're chatting about here today is what healing trauma is not. Now, you probably, if you're in the relationship space and you're following all these accounts on Instagram, there's so much talk about trauma this, trauma that. And I think a lot of times we can get so stuck in our trauma that our trauma becomes our identity. I'm so traumatized. I'm this. I've got my past. I've got this happened to me in my past and this happened to me in my past. I can't do this in the now because of what's happened to me in the past. Or what's happening to me now. I can't do this, that, or the other because of what's happening on the outside right now. So I want to talk about, yes, there's tips and there's things you can do for healing trauma, which I'm not a trauma therapist. I'm not a trauma specialist. I have experienced trauma and the effects of trauma and have had to work on that daily, but I'm not a trauma expert. And really, who is, right? Unless you are fully trained in being able to move trauma through somebody and help them actually integrate it on the other side, you shouldn't really be working with someone else's trauma and digging into their psyche. This is where you've got to be really careful who you're working with when it comes to trauma, because what I have seen is women who have worked with someone or joined a retreat, like a spiritual healing retreat, and all the stuff gets stirred up, all the trauma, all the past memories get stirred up. And then, our hour's up, off you go. Or the retreat's done, off you go. And you're basically walking away with these open wounds that have not been closed. So something I was taught very early on in my counseling career and in my training is you always have to make sure you're bringing a client full circle at the end with grounding into the now and into, all right, back to now. Because you don't want to leave someone walking away with these open wounds. And there are many therapists that don't know how to do this as well. They're not skilled with that. And so healing trauma is not going to therapy a lot of times. It's there as a tool and to process. But as you know, if you've ever been to therapy, the results are typically quite mediocre unless you really have someone that is doing their own work. They're very aligned with you. They can help you with the principles that you're working toward. They understand abuse and trauma or narcissistic abuse, and that's actually what you're trying to heal from is that type of PTSD trauma from a lifetime of experiencing abuse. Then you're just going to go there, punch a clock, pay them, and leave where you're no further along. And so if you don't believe me, ask yourself how many years you've been in and out of therapy and how much further along are you? Sure, there are exceptions. Some women will say, yep, therapy was a life changer. For me, never really. Honestly, my whole adult life, I've been in and out of therapy because I don't like to use my friends as therapists. I don't like to hold things inside. So it's a way to bounce things off of someone, pay them, and not feel guilt that you've overshared or anything like that, because that's what they're there for, right? So I'm not saying it's not a tool. And of course, my background is in counseling. That is the field that I got into. However, I started to see that clients would be coming in repeatedly. And then I'm like, okay, so what is actually going on here? Why they're not getting the breakthroughs? There'd be some clients that would and some wouldn't. And I think this is why. So number one, and this is what I still see this even with the women I coach, I have to say, I offer a solution and it's like, yeah, I already know that. I already knew this. Yeah, I know. I've heard this all before. And so that is why we stay stuck. We're not willing to look at things that might be uncomfortable we need to change, or things we might have to do, let go of, stop doing in order to change our situation. We get so wrapped up in the story of I'm this, I'm that, I'm busy, I'm overwhelmed, therefore I can't do these things. And when you're telling yourself bullshit stories, it doesn't feel good. So that's the first one, is you're just doing a lot of venting and a lot of excuse making as to why you can't change your life now. The next is ruminating on, why did this happen to me? Why did that happen to me? You're just stuck in the past. You're looking at your childhood. You're looking at your parents. You're looking at your past partners. And you're ruminating on, why did this have to happen to me? Why did this happen? Why am I like this? That just keeps you in the pits. The next is blaming your parents, your ex, and It's all just keeping you stuck in the problem. Really, healing is about creating new habits that allow you to thrive. It's learning where you have some wounding and putting some attention there. Yes. And the other thing here I'm going to add before I close up on this is, speaking of opening up a can of worms and not closing it, is a lot of our traumas in relationship are healed in relationship. And I know you don't want to hear that, because when you come out of one of these relationships, it's like, I don't want no man. I don't want any man. I never want a relationship. I never want to again. I don't trust men. I don't trust myself. And yes, there is a period in there where you definitely need to just focus on healing and coming back to yourself and figuring out what it is you love and you like on your own. But then you don't give that up as soon as you start dating or get into a new relationship. And this is where we go wrong. So regardless, you need to get that foundation set for yourself, but recognize that you can only do so much healing in isolation, that we actually heal and see our own shit in relationships. And so hopefully you will choose someone wisely that you invest in, that is there to do that work along with you, that you're both looking at yourselves and you're able to communicate and work through things. So healing trauma isn't isolating. Yes, there comes a period where maybe you need to cocoon after coming out of something like this. Definitely. But if you're still doing that months later and you don't want to see anyone, you want to just stay in your bubble, stay in your house, and you're feeling awful, you're not feeling good, you're not connecting, and things aren't improving, then that's when you need to look at getting some support, because you'll just continue on like that for years to come, because you'll just keep doing the same thing. So those are pieces of what healing trauma is not. And it's important to know what it's not before you can start doing the opposite and actually move the needle forward.